Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast, number 24. We're getting along here, aren't we? This is the one about the business of Jeet Kune, and this is part 2. Last week, I mentioned to you that the idea for last week's topic and today's topic came up as somewhat of a result of some of the stuff that we touched upon in episodes 1 and 2 of the Jeet Kune dialogues with my good friend and student Wayne Quinton down in Barbados, and then also with my good friend and colleague Neil Colliff here in Florida in Coral Springs. And then last week I did episode number 3 of the Jeet Kune dialogues with Jeet Kune author and instructor Kevin Seaman. And Kevin once ran his own very successful school, as well as a very successful multi-day, multi-instructor training camp in upstate New York. So in all 3 instances, they confirmed that knowing even a little about business greatly enhanced their longevity in the martial arts world, in the martial art business world. Right. So right off the bat, though, I'm going to tell you there's to be very honest, very open. I'm a little bit concerned about talking about the business of Jeet Kune, especially today, because unfortunately, to a certain degree, in some areas in the Jeet Kune world, as soon as one individual or a group of individuals start to talk about something, you can be sure that somewhere else there's a ton of people who are going to come down hard on them with the whole, oh, listen to that guy. He thinks he knows everything or whatever. Anybody who knows me will tell you that there's hardly ever a time where I think I know everything that there is, even if I am talking about it, right? So the reason why here I Love Jeet Kune, actually it's in the name, right? The reason is in the name, and I've talked about this before. This is a thing that came along and turned me into the person that I am today. I happen to know that Jeet Kune, Bruce Lee's influence, Dan Inosanto's influence, Ted Wong, Jerry Poteet, whoever. I happen to know that people in Jeet Kune, they have had such a profound effect on a ton of other people. I Love Jeet Kune. What Carlos and I are trying to do is to, as much as we can, I don't want to say necessarily bring these people together. That has been tried before. But to a certain degree, get the world talking about Jeet Kune and making sure that Jeet Kune's relevance in the martial art world is something that never diminishes and never decreases. Right. Okay. So that was a little rant off that. Right. It's just my way of. I'm not apologizing for anything because I haven't done anything wrong. Right. But that's very, very topical today. Right. You say something and then you have to backtrack and apologize to the world and what have you. Ridiculous. Right. Ridiculous. But it's human nature. If one person starts saying something, then you get a whole bunch of detractors are going to come out of the woodwork and start to tell you why it is that you shouldn't be listening to this guy, right? Anyhow, okay, so another thing I'll tell you right off the bat is that today, a lot of what I'm going to talk about, and this might be a relatively short broadcast also, a lot of what it is that I'm going to talk about is fact, and then maybe even more of it is in the realm of what if, right? Or in the realm of what would call wishful thinking. Okay, so when I opened my school, and actually this month in April of 2018, we are celebrating 30 years of officially operating Unified Martial Art Academy here in Miami. Right. So when I opened up my school, here's how much thought went into it. I'll get a warehouse and I'll start teaching. That's it, right? But understand that this was a business. But that's how much thought went into starting this business. I'll get a warehouse. Now, why a warehouse? because all of the people that I admired in the JKD world, primarily Dan Inosanto, where was his school? His school was in a warehouse, right, off first the Kali Academy off Normandy Avenue in Torrance, and then secondly, thirdly, but secondly for me, another warehouse off Glencoe Avenue in Marina del Rey. So I was following the example of my martial art hero, and so I got a warehouse over by Tamiami Airport, and we started. That was the launch of Unified Martial Art here in Miami. And fortunately for me, for the first 10 years or so, Jeet Kune Do pretty much sold itself. In other words, you didn't really have to know anything about the business of running a martial arts school, because people were relieved that there were now outlets where instruction in Bruce Lee's art and philosophy could be obtained. They could avail themselves of that. So Jeet Kune Do sold itself. So you probably, a lot of word of mouth stuff, you didn't have to know anything about advertising or what have you, right? But it would help to have a phone number and a Yellow Pages listing, let's say, right? So and the reason why I tell you this again is to underscore the reality that business has to be conducted in a particular way if it is going to be successful, right? There are people who will tell you that there is a formula for running and operating a successful business. And like it or not, martial art is no different, and Jeet Kune Do as a martial art is no different either, right? So in the world of martial art, there were some instructors who were not keen on losing business, see? Because when the thing sells itself, you could have a lot of people coming in and leaving, but they're being replaced by new people. So you might think that you're doing fine because, well, the numbers always seem to be the same. But you might not necessarily be growing because you got as many people going out the back door, and we talked about this last week. You have as many people going out the back door as you have coming in the front door, right? And that's not necessarily part of the formula for success. So there were people who were not keen on losing business. And so all of us sought to learn from the traditionalists, because remember, the traditionalists, the people in the Taekwondo world, for example, they were some of the first who got into the teaching of the business of martial arts. So like when I was talking to Kevin Seaman on the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues last week, in doing research for my conversation with Kevin, I discovered that he was an affiliate for a guy named Brian Tracy. Now, those of you who are watching this, who know even a little bit about business and sales in America, right, will recognize the name Brian Tracy, right? So I actually made a joke of it, and I showed Kevin all of the well, this is not all the Brian Tracy stuff that I have, not at all, right? But this is just a smattering of the Brian Tracy teachings, right? So what was interesting about that for me is that there's a guy named John Graydon, and I'll tell you right off the bat, I owe a lot of my success in commercial martial art to John Graydon, who is the original founder of NAPMA, the National Association for Professional Martial Artists. But I'll tell you a quick story of how when I went to, if I remember it accurately, the very first time I went to the NAPMA website, the way that the hook, right? Okay, Carlos is watching, so I'll use copyright and language and what have you, right? So the hook that John Graydon used was offering you, actually, let me see if I have it here. It was offering you a free 21 waves, I don't have it, right? But it was offering you a free CD from Brian Tracy. So that was the hook to get you in to start paying attention to him. So then, of course, he put you on the email autoresponder and whatever, and then that leads to your joining NAPMA. So in the same way that when I became enthused about Bruce Lee, and I decided that, so I'll tell you another story. For a number of years, I would go out every July 20th. I would fly out to Seattle and I would pay my respects at Bruce Lee's gravesite. But in 1983, I said to myself, Dwight, you will get only so far in Jeet Kune Do if you keep acknowledging the deceased source of Jeet Kune Do. If you want to get ahead, you have to go to the living source. Now, for me, everything that I had seen and read and heard about, the living source for Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do pointed to a sole individual, and that was Dan Inosanto. So that's why in July of '83, instead of going out to Seattle, I went out to Los Angeles and started training with Sifu Inosanto over there, right? So in the same way, when I realized that John Graydon was teaching to a certain degree what he had learned from business teachers in America, I went to the source. So that's how I became a Brian Tracy student myself, right? Because you go to the source whenever possible, because that's the way that you get the, let's call it the unadulterated truth, right? Okay, so to get back to what happened in the early days. So there were instructors who were not keen on losing students, and so they kind of adopted wholesale what the traditionalists were teaching. And I call them traditionalists because they were teaching business from the perspective or the viewpoint of running a karate school or a taekwondo school. And so that meant that some people kept the word karate in the name, or even put the name karate into their school. Some used the belts. You know, we talked at length about that. We'll talk a little bit about it again today. Even had the black belt club, right, and the belt testing, and then they even had the birthday parties for the little kids, because these things, to a certain degree, were proven models for success, right, for commercial success in martial art, right? You know, it kind of reminds me that when the MMA trend came about a couple of decades ago, a lot of people added the adjective mixed to the name of their schools. So previously, their school might have been such and such martial arts academy, and then it became such and such mixed martial arts academy, right? Okay, it's called a trend, right? So today, with some schools, you have to dig really deep to find the Jeet Kune Do, even though they might have it listed on like their web pages or something. But then when you take a look at their class schedule, you might see the BJJ or the CSW or the Muay Thai, right? And you might not actually see a class called Jeet Kune Do. You might not see a phase 1 class or a phase 2 or phase 3, right? But my belief is that, because I know these people, right? My belief is that the JKD is in there, but it's just not obvious, right? Now, I'm not gonna, in this broadcast, I'm not gonna try to determine why that is. People do whatever it is that they think they need to do, right? So I'm not here to criticize somebody else's approach or whatever. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of this is fact from my viewpoint, but a lot of it is also what if, right? My indulgent in fantasy, right? So someone somewhere is going to rightly say that instead of me complaining about what woulda, coulda, shoulda, right, I should be doing something about it. And again, to be honest, I did try to put forward such a thing a number of years ago, but it didn't go very well. And perhaps a lot of it was in the approach that I used, right? Or you know how sometimes in your family, people who know you well, right? I think the saying is something about a prophet is not known in his own land, or without honor is it's a biblical quote, right? So sometimes when you are part of a family and you have an idea, the other members of the family might not be as receptive to you as they might be receptive to somebody outside of the family telling them the same thing or saying the same thing that you're saying, if you get my meaning, right? But I will share this vision with you. I do have a vision, because I said part of what I'm doing today is fantasy, right? I do have a vision of one day a true instructor conference, right? A multi-day instructor conference where maybe for the first couple of days, what we have is it's for instructors only. And so what we're doing as Jeet Kune Do instructors is we're talking about what works at my school, what works at your school, what works at this other guy's school, in order to promote and push forward the Jeet Kune Do. You got that? Then the last couple of days are for students, right? So we have a multi-day event, but the first couple of days is instructors brainstorming about how to continue to push forward Jeet Kune Do, and then the practical stuff happens the next couple of days. And now what we have is the instructors teaching their approach to such and such aspect of Jeet Kune Do, right? Okay. Stuff like that has been attempted before, but I think that we could do with a lot more of it, right? So now to get back to the you know, being smart about Jeet Kune Do. You absorb what is useful. That is one of the tenets of Jeet Kune Do. So and this is one of my pet peeves, let's take the ranking system. So if we determine that the ranking system, in all honesty, is a good way to keep students motivated at your school, then that's what you do. You make use of the ranking system. But do we have to go the belt way? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we realize that the essence of it is to have a structured, colored ranking system. So then we do our research and we go, okay, is there a way to have a ranking system that maintains the idea of non-conformity or non-classicalness, right? Which is the Jeet Kune Do ideal, right? Okay, so you know, maybe that's something that we can discuss, right? The idea of Black Belt Club, right, which was a way of getting people to sign up for membership for extended periods of time. Maybe there's something in Jeet Kune Do that we could modify or adapt, right, to be the equivalent of the Black Belt Club. You know, maybe you call it the Phase 4 Club or something, right? In the karate schools, the level above Black Belt Club was Masters Club, right? So maybe what we have then is, you know, maybe we call it the Jeet Kune Do Club. If you think about it, this is what was going on at the Kali Academy back in the mid 1970s, because they had the phase class, and then you had to be voted into the Jeet Kune Do class. So you had the equivalent there of what you had at the karate school. You had the lower level classes, and then you had the upper level classes. So I tell you this because I want you to understand that as a martial art method. Oh, wait, I just remembered, I'm supposed to do the shirt thing. Okay, there we go, right? Sorry about that, right? So in Jeet Kune Do, we already had that structure built in, but maybe we just weren't paying attention to it. I'll tell you something also, and I'll go into this in a subsequent broadcast. I can't tell you exactly when, right? But when the thing called, in the classical schools, in the traditional schools, when the thing called rotating curriculum came along, I took a look at it. I was in a class with Dave Kovar, right, who's another guy that, you know, outside of the Jeet Kune Do world that I give a lot of credit to for teaching me stuff about the business of martial art. When I looked at the rotating curriculum, I saw exactly what it was that we needed in JKD training. Because you have to remember, on the seminar circuit, for example, which is where a lot of us gain our information. On the seminar circuit, if I'm at a seminar with Dan Inasano, he's not necessarily teaching when I was at my first seminar in 1983, everything that was taught was not beginner stuff. So I had to dig deep and do my best to catch up with what was being presented. And so on seminar, you don't necessarily get a structured approach that you can use identically the way it was presented in the seminar, identically the way it is back in your school. You have to become experienced enough. You got to put in the time and get to an understanding of how to structure your curriculum and what have you. So when the rotating curriculum thing came along, I took a look at it and I go, this is exactly what we need, right, for Jeet Kune Do. Okay, but I don't have time now to go into the details of rotating curriculum. But I'll tell you another thing that I discovered, and I should have. My senior will criticize me for this. I should have pulled a picture of it. But also, just think of not the Jeet Kune Do symbol, but the Junfan symbol, right? So the yin yang with the two arrows, but without the Chinese lettering. That is a perfect depiction of what the rotating curriculum could be. So once again, right, quite serendipitously, Jeet Kune Do had built in what the karate people were teaching us about the business of martial arts, right? We had our own symbol which we could apply to it, right? Okay, so in your school you had the choice. You could teach here's another one. I thought of this just yesterday during my junior Jeet Kune Do class. When kids would come to me and tell me that such and such classmate of theirs has a yellow belt in Taekwondo, has a yellow belt in karate or what have you, and they would ask me, well, what do I say, because we don't use belts? And I said, well, here's what you tell them. You tell them that at your martial arts school, we do things differently. We're not like everybody else. See, because what I'm trying to impart into the fertile minds of those young kids is that sometimes you want to be a standout. You want to think of yourself in terms of being a standout. You want to think of yourself as being non-mainstream. You want to think of yourself as being, because that's all part and parcel of if you think that Bruce Lee was a mainstream guy, then you might need to think again. So I passed that mentality on to the little ones in my school. Yes, we do things differently. And so my attempt was to teach them the confidence, right, in being able to stand up for yourself and not try to find your strength and your confidence in being like everybody else. Does that make sense? Right? So we had a different approach to our ranking system. So I could tell them what the equivalent at Unified Martial Art Academy would be for a yellow belt or what have you. And then they could walk away and go back to school proudly announcing that they were such and such rank, right? Okay, so, and again, it's a choice. You can teach people to conform, right? And be like everybody else, right? Which means, what is that? Average, right? Normal, okay? Or you could teach them to stand out. It's entirely up to you, right? Which is kind of the challenge that we would have in Jeet Kune Do, because everybody knows, even people who are not martial artists recognize Bruce Lee as a standout. If I am a Jeet Kune Do instructor, if I'm a legitimately certified Jeet Kune Do instructor, then standout, non-conform, non-mainstream is part of my legacy, let's call it, right? And so if it's important to you, then you do what you can to maintain that aspect of the legacy, right? Whereas today, right, especially in the political climate that we enjoy here, it might be all about following the party line, you know, right? Because you gotta be very careful about stuff and what have you. So I'm gonna try to make a joke, right? So this is a Dwight Woods attempt at a joke, right? So in today, what do we have that dominates the martial art landscape, right? MMA, right? Which for most people stands for mixed martial arts, right? But for me, see, MMA stands for two things. One of them, y'all can write this down, right? You have my permission to try to use this as a joke if you can improve on it. MMA stands for two things: mass market appeal and also mass media advertising. You see? And those things are not necessarily part and parcel again of Jeet Kune Do. But it doesn't. But I'm not condemning mass market appeal, because the truth is, what we need to do is to learn how to use mass market appeal, or how to create mass market appeal for what we do in Jeet Kune Do. And that's the struggle. That's the task at hand, right? So I told you about my going to the source with Brian Tracy. I got to tell you one last thing in conclusion here. There was another business teacher out there that I started to hear about him. Who I'm trying to think who I first heard. Anyhow, right? I'll just tell you. Name is Dan Kennedy. So let me show you, right? Just bear with me for a second. Dan Kennedy material, right? So here's the ultimate marketing plan. Oh, I'll tell you something funny about this. Here's the reason, right? I'm trying to be funny today. Here's one reason why I started following Dan Kennedy. Oh shoot, I'm gonna mess this up. You see it right there? The marketing triangle, right? When I first heard him talk about the marketing triangle, I go, okay, triangle, that's Kali, I'm in, right? And what the marketing triangle is this. You got to make sure you have a message. You got to make sure you have a market. Actually, let me start that again, right? Make sure there's a message, make sure there's a market, and then decide what media it is that you're going to be using to get to this market. So, ultimate marketing plan, ultimate sales letter, because you got to know what it is that you're going to be saying to people. Wait, let me try to see if I can do this. I'm not going to go through every one of these, right? I'm just going to pull some titles for you. Here's a good one, right? Time management for entrepreneurs. Here's another one. The no BS marketing to the affluent. This is the classic, right? Carlos will appreciate this, right? No BS direct marketing for non-direct marketing businesses. And I'll show you one more. What's another? Yeah, this is a good one. All right. The no BS ruthless management of people and profits. Right. So when I sat in my first, this was 2006, I think it was, my first Dan Kennedy event. I heard him and Bill Glazer start talking about stuff like, before you open up the business, before you go into business, you do market research. And I go, holy crap. That word research occurs in tenet number 1 of the 4 tenets of Jeet Kune Do. Because how does it go? The truth in combat is different for every individual in this style, right? Tenet number one, research your own experience for the truth. And here's Dan Kennedy and Bill Glazer, and they're teaching that you do market research first, right? Then tenet number 2 was what? Absorb what is useful. And here's what they said. Sometimes you go outside of your own industry and see what's working. So the classic example is the drive-through, right? Was it banking? Was it fast food? Was it pharmaceuticals? Who did it first? But in any case, whoever started it, somebody else realized that it would work in their industry. So you look at what's working in the karate schools, in the traditionalist or the classical approach, like a ranking system, and you absorb what is useful about the ranking system. It does not mean necessarily, or it didn't mean for me, that you adopt wholesale the ranking system. It meant that you extracted the essence of it, which is what we do in Jeet Kune Do. Why the heck do we train Muay Thai? We train Muay Thai to extract the essence. Why do we train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Hopefully, it is to extract the essence, right? What does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu bring to the Jeet Kune Do mix? You see, it's not necessarily to adopt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Pencak, Silat, combat submission wrestling, shoot wrestling, whatever it is, wholesale, because everything is supposed to go through the Jeet Kune Do filter, right? Okay, anyhow, tenet number 3, reject what is useless. Reject what is useless, I like to say, is self-explanatory. However, be careful that you don't reject something before you have really tried to understand, aka absorb it. And then, tenet number 4, add what is specifically your own. Now, Carlos is still on here watching, so he'll appreciate this. That's known in marketing circles as a unique selling position or a unique sales proposition. So it is about positioning yourself as being unique in the market. I have always tried to preach this to JKD people. Rick Fay, my senior in Minnesota, is not the same person that I am. Chris Kent, who, by the way, episode number 4 of the Jeet Kune Dialogues, 2 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, Eastern Time, I'll be dialoguing with Chris Kent, right? Chris Kent is not the same person that I am. Cass Magda is not the same person that I am. And then the 4 of us have Dan and Asano in common, who again is not the same person as any of us, and who is not the same person as his teacher, Bruce Lee. So we all have things in common, but we all have our unique approach to what it is that we do. And so, once again, built into Jeet Kune Do, accidentally, serendipitously, fortuitously, whatever, built into Jeet Kune Do is the ideas or the principles that people use for success in business, right? So, I sincerely hope that that rant that I just went on, because I'll call today's broadcast like an extended rant, I hope that it made sense to you. Sometimes I think that this is something that would be much better transmitted if there was a bunch of us sitting around a conference table or something, right? Which is what, again, if you keep that image, that's what I'm talking about at a true instructors conference one day for Jeet Kune Do people from around the world, right? So I'll finish with this, right? This is the what if. What if there had been an attempt in the early days in Jeet Kune Do to get things under control, to form an organization, and the sole purpose of the organization was to move everyone, every legitimate person in the Jeet Kune Do world, to move them forward, right, along a path of self-development, right, self-awareness, and success. You see, I think that we had or have the ultimate role model, this guy over my shoulder on this side, sorry, right? Actually, this guy too, right? I think that we had in Bruce Lee the absolute role model. And actually, that will be next week's broadcast. The title tentatively, Why Bruce Lee Should Be Your Role Model, right? So until then, be sure to check us out on ilovejeetkundo.com, where you can get volume 1 of the Quick Skills series, right? Again, I failed to do it this week, but it is there. I was actually on SoundCloud setting stuff up just before I came live on Facebook, so we're almost there. I do have the MP3, so Freddie Harrison, when you listen to this, I do have the MP3s catalog. It's just now a matter of uploading stuff. Same thing, I do have the MP4s cataloged, and now it's just a matter of uploading them to the YouTube, right? So, bear with me for a little bit. I know I keep promising, but that's it, okay? So, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel. Until this time next week, or on tomorrow's Jeet Kune Do Dialogues page, you guys have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Take care.